I know what y'all thinking, right? I get it. I get it. There's the Chargers, right? There's the Chiefs out there, right? There's so many teams. Miami, Buffalo, the Jets. What the Jets gonna do this year? What the Jets gonna do this year, right? There's so many teams. The AFC is stacked, and I can't even keep up with it. But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But I tell you one thing. I think we forgetting about one particular team that for some crazy reason we've been forgetting about for the last couple of years. All right, welcome into Flock Nation Speaks. Flock Nation Speaks. Flock Nation Speaks, your Baltimore Ravens podcast, where we talk about the best team in NFL history. If you're a Ravens fan, I am a huge Joe Flacco fan. Wise Usher once said, situations will arise in our lives. I'm talking about shut down. Like you're not throwing on Jimmy Smith. Joe is criminally underrated. Lock him up in cuffs. Criminally underrated. Lamar's put this team as a top 5 offense for the first time in 20 years. Got the arm talent. Jay Cutler had it too. I don't care about this argument against total TDs and all this. Oh, you want to talk about defense? Oh, until next time. All right, what is going on, good people? We back at it again. It's Flock Nation Speaks, your Baltimore Ravens podcast, where we talk about the best team in NFL history. If you're a Ravens fan, of course. And also, let's not forget, if you just happen to be forgetting about this certain team. Anywho, right, the AFC, we talked about it before. We're going to jump right into it. I'm your host, DJ, as always. And then we're going to get right into this one because why waste time, right? Why waste time? But let's talk about this. Are the Ravens this year's dark horse team, right? Like out of all the teams in the AFC, right? And it's stacked, right? It's a stacked little conference over here. It's a stacked little conference over here. But is it the Ravens? Are they the ones that people are like, yeah? But then the injuries in a couple of years. But then John Harbaugh, he makes decisions that we don't understand. And then what Lamar gonna do because he got paid? And then is the weapons gonna really pan out as much as we think the weapons gonna? Everybody. I mean, they got the list. They got the list of excuses, and I get that, right? I get that. But certain people have said Lamar Jackson has no excuses. So in that case, But I will say, something's pointing to the Ravens being this year's kind of like dark horse team, being this year's overlooked team, even though they're at the top of the division and at the top of the conference every single year, barring injury, of course, right? I think sometimes we remember teams based off of what we just saw, right? Chiefs, greatest team of all time, right? We've seen them go to so many Super Bowls. We've seen them build this dynasty of sorts, right? Chiefs are really good. They're a really good team, right? The Bills, the Bills, they've been competitive, 13-3 last year. They've been running the division since Tom Brady retired. I mean, come on. What can you say? What can you say about the Bills? What can you say? Like, what can you say wrong about them? Right? You got other teams. You got the Chargers. They ain't done nothing yet, but nonetheless, does not matter, right? They got a high ceiling, right? They got potential. That's what they got. The Jets got Aaron Rodgers. That's what they got, right? They got Aaron Rodgers. Don't matter, right? Don't matter, right? They got Aaron Rodgers. So that's just what 4 or 5 teams right there. Like AFC gonna be heavy, gonna be hectic, gonna be a battle. But then, of course, you go to the Bengals, right? The whole AFC North, really. You go to the Bengals. We've seen what they've done. We know that the Browns have potential, right? They got potential too. They just the Browns. They want the Browns. We'd be like, oh man, that's a good team right there. But they're the Browns, so we got to wait and see. They on wait and see basis. Still gonna be competitive. I don't know about necessarily contenders per se, but they'll be competitive, right? Feel sorry for certain people who switch their allegiance over there to Pittsburgh for a little bit. But anyway, then of course you got the AFC West too, right? So I think the Broncos could probably be in this conversation. Let's bring up the AFC list real quick. I think the Broncos could probably be in this conversation, right? The Broncos is a team. They are a team who could be in the conversation of maybe you could overlook them, right? I don't know about the Raiders just because you just never know what they're gonna do, right? You never know how well coached they're gonna be. You never know what they're gonna do. They've been the Raiders for a little bit, so and kind of like we said before, you got a young division in the AFC South. The AFC North is going to be stacked. The AFC East is going to be stacked. And the AFC West, let's just be honest about it, is going to be stacked. I think even the Raiders with Jimmy G is still going to be a stacked division. Just is, right? Just is. So I think when you look at it, right? When you look at it, the Ravens could potentially be like this year's like dark horse. This year's team where we're just like, I don't know what they're gonna do. I don't know if they're actually gonna be as good as we think they are because there's a lot of expectation on them. But the Ravens are pretty decent with expectation. Now, albeit I'll say this, the Ravens haven't been a team with expectation, with Super Bowl aspirations, but for so many times, right? Really, it's been the last 5 years under Lamar Jackson, right? In that, this coaching staff and this defense and the combination of the offense that goes with it, right? Like that's when they became Super Bowl contenders. Before that, they were Super Bowl contenders maybe once or twice in the entire history of the Ravens. So thought process becomes, are the Ravens, could they like sneak up on some people this year? I don't think they're going to sneak up on anybody. I think people are going to have the same questions about the Ravens as they always have had about the Ravens, but now you have a little bit more talent to back it up. We talked about this offense. We know this defense is going to be good, right? You put that combination together, and it's just, it has all the makings, right? It's a perfect recipe on paper. Right, it has all the makings of something just special, something so sweet, right? Oh, so sweet. It's the best pie you ever had, right? But then when you take out certain things, take out a little bit of that evaporated milk. I mean, you take out that condensed milk and use evaporated milk because it's the same practically, right? It happens like that. And instead, I mean, even Ravens offended by that. Like we're not taking nobody away this year. We're not taking nobody away this year. All right, Ray, we got it. We're not taking nobody away this year, right? So this probably will hopefully be the healthiest this team has been in quite some time, right? Shout out to Raven. I mean, she's a big Ravens fan too. Listen to her name. But that's the thing about it. Like the Ravens have potential to be a pretty big dark horse in this year's season, but I think that's probably because the AFC has so many options for people to pick. Right, they have so many guys that haven't been there yet, but at the same time, like the potential is there, the possibility of them being great is there. So I think it'll be very, very interesting, right? I think it'll be very interesting to see how this AFC plays out as we get closer and closer. And another topic that I want to talk about, not today, but throughout the next couple of weeks, is just the AFC in general. What the heck has the AFC been up to, right? Who is where? What's the outlook on the AFC? Because it's so many teams, so many changes. What's going on? What's been the big move? So we'll talk about that later, of course. In the coming weeks. But interestingly enough, I really do. I feel like the Ravens are almost like an underdog team this year, right? They're like a dark horse type team this year. Not to say there's not expectations, because there is, but I think the Ravens are almost kind of on a wait and see. Like we want to wait and see if they can stay healthy, right? Because that's been the biggest thing. I think outside of health, and some coaching blunders here and there, the Ravens have been at the top of the AFC for the past couple of years. So I don't think they even should be considered a dark horse, but I think they could be, right? They shouldn't be considered underrated, but I think they could be, right? People are, wondering about this wide receiving core. You got Bateman, is he going to stay healthy? You got Odell, is he going to stay healthy? You got Zay Flowers, but he's a rookie, right? You got Duvernay, what's he going to do? And then, of course, the overall health of the team. They know the defense is going to be good, but it's the offense that everybody's looking at like, that's where the pressure's at. All right, the pressure's on. Let's see what happens. But, very, very, very interesting, how that plays out. And it's crazy because people are overlooking the Ravens, I think, a little bit. Because it's just funny because you listen to, like, the tier list and you listen to, like, people talk about top teams in the AFC. And for some reason, the Ravens just slip through the grasps. Right. I think, like you said, like we said before. So what have we done? What have you done for me lately, league? Right. And the Ravens haven't done anything for you lately. Right. That's why people don't trust the Ravens in the playoffs, because they haven't done anything for you lately. right? That's why people don't trust the Ravens over the past couple of years based off of those years, because what have you done for me lately, right? Nothing so far, right? There's still a lot left to prove for the Ravens in the regular season. It's been great, right? Especially when everybody's healthy, it's been great. Can you stay healthy and can you take that momentum into the playoffs and not have coaching blunders on top of that when you get there? We'll see what happens. But I tell you, somebody who isn't forgetting about Lamar Jackson, who's faced Lamar Jackson a couple of times, and actually, I'm gonna be honest with you, he's kind of had his number, right? He's kind of had his number. I mean, let's be honest. This dude right here has had everybody's number, right? He's taken the league by storm. We all know him. He's probably the top quarterback in the league, and I think it's arguable for a lot of people. But I think a lot of people would say that Patrick Mahomes is the top quarterback in the league. He had an interview recently. Shout out to Justin BTW _ on Twitter, who put this one out, and I just thought it was an interesting, interesting little, it's interesting to hear about what other people say about Lamar Jackson. That's not necessarily in the media, right? That's not in the media. The players, the guys he plays against, the guys who see him on the sidelines, the guys who do the same type of work that he has to do. It's interesting to hear from those guys. So Patrick Mahomes, when asked about Lamar Jackson, he said, and I quote, "He's a heck of an athlete, a great leader on and off the field. It's really the media who paints him as a villain." We talked about this for a long time. I guess the second part of that statement here in 1 second. The media paints Lamar Jackson as a villain. We talked about this before when he was going through contract negotiations and stuff like that, right? Years prior, where we talked about moving the goalposts and stuff like that too. Lamar Jackson has been kind of put under an unfair light since he got started, right? And I think Mahomes honestly probably would have went through the same thing if he had the same struggles as Lamar has had, right? Whether it be in the playoffs, whether it be with coaching, whether it be with getting a contract done, all those things. Right, I think Mahomes would have went, if Mahomes didn't have the success that he had, and he had like maybe a little bit, like maybe a taste of it, maybe that first Super Bowl, and then he got to the AFC Championship game and lost. Or maybe he didn't win that first Super Bowl, then you see what happened in the second Super Bowl, right? Like it's just very interesting, right? It's interesting to hear from guys who play the position, from guys who play against Lamar, what they think about Lamar. Because yes, the media does paint Lamar as a villain, right? The media really, let's be honest, Lamar Jackson's a trending topic. The media uses Lamar Jackson for clickbait. The media uses Lamar Jackson for clickbait, and they were doing that the whole offseason with these contract negotiations, right? And then it kind of got hushed a little bit, right? I know Acho said he was out of excuses, so still like kind of, trying to like piggyback on that. But then kind of like if they don't have a reason to use him as a villain, if they don't have a reason to bring him down a little bit, right? So, to stir people up, then they don't talk about him. Interestingly enough, right? It's interesting that they don't talk about Lamar when they don't have anything negative to say. Mahomes also said, "I model my game off of him. What he is doing is special, by far the best QB in the AFC, arguably a top 5 of all time." Now, this is it's one of those questions where you ask the top or one of the top QBs in the league, who's the top QB in the league, and you wonder if they can say themselves or not, right? That's what I was wondering when I first read this quote. I was like, I wonder if he just said that, because I don't know the context of the interview. I just saw this quote, thought it was a cool quote, thought it was interesting, thought I should bring it up. And it's interesting that Mahomes says that not only is Lamar Jackson the top quarterback in the AFC, but he is a top 5 quarterback of all time. That's interesting to me, right? That's interesting to me that a guy of that understands the game as much as Patrick Mahomes has seen the successes, has seen successes in this league, sees that a guy who hasn't necessarily had the level of who hasn't had the achievements, I should say, right? Hasn't had the achievements of a Patrick Mahomes, but he still sees him as a top quarterback, not only in the AFC, but of all time, right? That's crazy, right? That's crazy when you think about it, right? It's crazy to see that a guy like Mahomes, game recognized game. I think Lamar would say the same thing about him. And that's the thing. Like we talked about it before. The AFC is stacked with quarterbacks. I mean, really, the whole league. There's so many good young quarterbacks out there in the league, and a couple good veterans too, right? That are out there in the league, and it's just crazy. What that means. But a cool quote by Patrick Mahomes, basically saying, hey, Lamar Jackson, that dude is, he's like that. That dude is like that. You know what I mean? Like, and we've talked about this before. Like, the reason that the Ravens will be a Super Bowl contender is propelled by Lamar Jackson, right? I don't want to say only because, I don't want to say is because, I want to say it's propelled by Lamar Jackson simply because, number one, you got a solid defense, right? Number two, you do have tools around him now too, right? You put Lamar Jackson on top of that, and the kind of dangerousness of him on the offensive end and what he can do. I mean, it's going to be if everything stays healthy, it's going to be a good season. I think for Ravens flock. I think for the Flock Nation, this is going to be a good season. Also, I saw another tweet. Shout out to my boy Pedro. So on Twitter he is at RHORMES_. He puts out a lot of I really like this guy's tweets. He puts out a lot of cool statistical tweets and just interesting takes, interesting things that he sees. Right, he throws it out there, and I always tend to lean on his tweets a little bit just because of the interestingness of it. But he was talking about the Marquise Brown effect on Lamar Jackson's deep throws are very real, right? So that meaning, the utilization of Marquise Brown and the year that he's had without, Hollywood. So when you look at it, he says, so I'm gonna read the whole tweet. The Marquise Brown effect on Lamar Jackson's deep throws are very real. His numbers with Hollywood on the team for 20-plus yard passes in 2019, he went for 39.7% for 829 yards, 12 TDs, 2 picks, a 92.9 grade, which of course that was his MVP year. That's pretty good. I think 39% sounds low, but at the same time, on the bright side, they was taking more chances at it too. But then in 2020, you were 21 of 58, so that's 36%. You got 661 yards, 6 touchdowns, 4 picks, 85.5 rating. And this, of course, was the year, the COVID year, right? This was the year, with all the the craziness going on, with the whole team, catching COVID and everything. So doesn't necessarily affect this per se, but still, I mean, similar, right? Not as many yards, not as many touchdowns, but kind of similar, right? And then you look at 2021, which was the year before last, 18 to 54, 33.3%, 619, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 77.7 grade. Interestingly enough, this was another one of those injury seasons, right? This was another one of those injury riddle seasons where, you really didn't have a lot of guys out there for Lamar to spread the ball around. We saw, kind of from 2019 on, that's it. It's interesting how it goes down and down, because when you think about it, right? When you think about it, it's interesting how it goes, continues to kind of trend down, because that's kind of when, things change with like the injuries and everything, and injuries became big effects, right? People missing games became big effects, within the game. And then you got without Marquise Brown, so it goes all the way down to a 29%, 14 of 47, a 29.8%, 407 yards, 5 TDs, and 3 interceptions. He also says Zay Flowers should be a great help to Lamar Jackson stretching the field and bringing back that deep threat action once again. So interestingly enough, of course, I mean, and I think we know this, right? Number one, Hollywood Brown was Lamar Jackson's number one target in terms of a wide receiver, right? He was the guy he had the most chemistry with. He was the guy he had the most trust with. And he was a guy who, Lamar Jackson was like, this is my guy, right? This is who I'm going to get it to. And this is how it's going to be. Now, albeit I wonder how many of those incompletions end up being drops and everything too, because, remember the Ravens were a top drop team in the league too. But we saw, especially especially in 2022, we saw the struggle of, in 2021 too, but we saw Bateman go down in 2021, and then in 2022 without Hollywood, we saw Bateman go down, we saw Duvernay go down, we saw Deshaun Jackson have to be signed. We saw a whole lot of different things that, number one, don't necessarily correlate to the deep game being consistent, but also like it doesn't open up the deep game either, right? It doesn't open up anything with the deep game. So yeah, I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum before. Like having the combination of Rashad Bateman and Hollywood Brown was an amazing combination that I think was gone far too soon. But at the same time, when you think about it, right? When you think about it, losing Hollywood Brown, he was a speedster. He could get down the field. He could fly. It's interesting how, it's interesting, but it makes sense how things change with Hollywood Brown not on the field, right? Like, I mean, I can imagine like, seeing Hollywood, and I wish I knew. I'm kind of curious. Let me see if I can find it real quick. But I'm kind of curious what the deep pass percentage is for. Let me see if I can look real quick. What the deep pass percentage it was in 2022, just to see like, how bad it was. But it's just interesting, man. Like when you think about it, because Lamar was dead last in the league when it came to deep pass percentage. Let me see if I can see it. Which, I mean, this constitutes more than just a 20-yard throws too. But I don't know, just interesting. Because I don't know what the average is when it comes to that type of thing. Like, I don't know what the average is when it comes to like the 20, yards of 20 or more or whatever. Which, I mean, really, when you look at it, like the percentages are pretty consistent throughout the league. They all, 60s and up. So, I mean, anyway, just interesting to me, like how that works. But anywho, yeah. I mean, it is nice to see Zay Flowers out there, have another speedster out there, a guy you can trust. Hopefully a guy who is going to be able to get some yards after the catch too, because that's another thing that's been missing. I know they don't necessarily go with 20 plus yard passes, the ball traveling 20 yards in the air and whatnot, but still, that's been another thing that had been missing for a while, is those yards after the catch. The Ravens were dead last. Maybe, I don't think it was last year, but especially the years before, the years prior with Hollywood Brown, the Ravens were dead last in yards after the catch. They were first when it came to drops. And I think that led to a lot of the issues we saw with the passing game, not to mention that the scheme wasn't necessarily advantageous either. But we'll see, right? We'll see what the Ravens do this year. Definitely going to be talking about the AFC coming up in the next couple of episodes, probably more than a couple of episodes, because it's going to take a minute. But, as we get closer and closer, see what the rest of the AFC been up to, see how that's going to go. What y'all think? Are the Ravens this year's dark horse, or is it another team? Is it somebody else you thinking of? All right, is it a Denver Broncos type of team? Is it one of these teams with rookie quarterbacks, right? Tennessee maybe, or Houston or Indy maybe. Cleveland, another one that I think is overlooked a lot of times, right? Another team that I think people are just like, I don't know about Cleveland. I don't know about them. But then, we'll see what they do. And then, I mean, of course, the Jets and everything too. I don't think they're necessarily a dark horse. I think as soon as they got Aaron Rodgers, I think, not to say that they became contenders, but they got Aaron Rodgers, and I think their ceiling went up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But as I wrap up, as always, you can always watch or listen to Flock Nation Speaks, your Baltimore Ravens podcast. You can listen to Flock Nation Speaks on all your favorite podcasting platforms: Google Podcasting, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. You can watch on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter if you ever want to do so. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Favorite if you haven't already. Add me to your queue, whatever you got to do if you haven't already. But I'll see you guys on the next episode of Flock Nation Speaks. Until next time.